Whew. All right, well, my name is Sydney Cox. I am in Education 4400 with Dr. Kevin Curry Knight. This is my retrospective project. Okay, so first, why am I doing a video? I am doing a video because this was what I was supposed to do for my Project 3. I most definitely needed to do a video, and you'll probably understand in a moment because I'm going to give you a recap of what my 3 projects were. But just to let you know, I am supposed to be explaining how what I've done this semester reached the Standard 9 of Professional Learning and Ethical Practice, in which the teacher engages in ongoing professional learning and uses evidence to continually evaluate her practice, particularly the effects of her choices and actions on others, and adapts practice to meet the needs of each learner. Alright, so for my first project, I actually did a 21-day unit. Now, I chose this because in my 4 years of being at ECU, I actually haven't done a whole unit before, and I was really nervous about it. I didn't know what it was supposed to look like, and it turned out to be very difficult because you see this one goal, and you're trying to figure out how to start here and get over here with the student. And this just seemed like the most important thing to do for my class. I feel like as a teacher, unit plan building is probably the first thing I probably needed to learn. So I chose it as soon as I found out in the class we can do whatever we feel we want to learn to help build as educators or whatever our major was. So I'm an English education major. I want to teach 9th or 12th grade, but 10th and 11th are starting to grow on me. So in that, my first unit was on Hamlet. And I started out with these little Shakespeare relation station groups. And we slid through and we read Hamlet. We looked at mentor text. I realized that it was very overwhelming. There was a ton of worksheets and paperwork that I needed to find. And now I understand why teachers pay teachers and stuff like that. But this whole unit I try to do myself. So I had to do worksheets. I had to find PowerPoints. I had to find websites that were talking about Shakespeare, talking about the things that I wanted the students to learn. And at the end, I did a CPT where the students were going to basically have Hamlet and Shakespeare on trial. So with that, it took forever. We had 3 weeks. And in the beginning, I wasn't very sure how I wanted students to learn. Actually, honestly, I didn't know what I wanted students to learn. And that was something that I just found out when making my unit. I didn't realize a unit is supposed to be based off of something you want your students to know. And I didn't realize that in the beginning. So Project 1 was so helpful. And it helped me realize I really needed to work on just tweaking my skills as an educator and planning ahead of time. So to say that it goes with Standard 9 with teaching, the teacher engages in ongoing professional learning, I most definitely did. Just in the beginning, that first 3 weeks, I was feeling out what the teacher wanted. Did he want me to follow a rubric? Was he playing when he said that I could do whatever I wanted? And he wasn't. But I didn't find that out until Project 1 was done. So I learned a lot. And honestly, it made me think about how it affected my students if I didn't know how to do a unit, you know? So with that in mind, I switched over to my Project 2, which turned out to be assessment. Because during my unit planning, I struggled with unit assessments, a summative or a formative. It was really, really difficult. But I wanted to focus on summative because I, before, hated summative assessments. At least the standard ones where it's multiple choice and the students, it basically looks like an ESC, and I'm not really a fan of it. But after writing one, it cleared up a lot. I realized that students learn differently. And keeping that in mind, I learned that in the first week of writing the assessment. Writing the assessment didn't take me as much time as realizing that my students are different. A lot of students have test anxiety. A lot of them know the work, but they don't quite understand the question. And therefore, I needed to look into different ways to assess my students. And that is how my project 2 actually morphed into something else. So it started out with this idea: I want assessment, I want to research, I want to do so much research. I knew I wanted to do that, but I wasn't sure what I was going to apply the research to. So I sat down and I really tried to, honestly, I just started watching videos. I watched a ton of videos, watched a whole bunch of blog posts, and I found myself over in Singapore. Apparently, like, really top-notch education system, and they were talking about assessment and how they test their students and how their students are blowing up all of the EOCs and they're doing so well. And I was like, why can't our students do that when we have so much technology here too? So then I decided I wanted to research assessment, most definitely. But now, what was I going to do with that information? And I said, okay, I'm going to write an assessment, which I already kind of had one. So I said, let me use this assessment. Now, how am I going to change it to apply to my students? Because at the same time, I wanted to differentiate. I wanted the students who said, hey, Ms. Cox, I know this information. I know the test doesn't say it, but I do. What ways could I change it where the students could take the exact same test and possibly do better because it was in a different way? So then I decided I would have my paper version automatically, the multiple choice, regular EOC standard look. Then I would have it where I would read to the students. And I would read the question, and I would read the answers, and I would also read the passage, because maybe fluency wasn't there, and it maybe hindered their comprehension a bit, you know? So then I said, what will my third one be? Because mixing them together wouldn't really work. And then I decided on a game. I said, I'm going to create a game for my last assessment. And creating a game was difficult. It was really hard. So I settled on Kahoot, and I basically just made it multiple choice, but where the whole class could see. And Kahoot has this little survey mix of information where you can see what students answered, so I could actually assess which students understood what. Now, my project 2 drives us right into project 3, because even Dr. Knight and I both thought I was going to create a game, not just fill in a game somewhere else. And that was my initial plan. It's just I ran out of time. So after talking it through in my mind, just what I want to do for project 3, I decided, hey, I'm going to extend project 2 and I'm going to actually build a game. Now, this was fun. I will definitely be doing it in the future. I had the students to kind of do a breakout game. If you don't know what breakout is, basically it's a team building exercise, but I wanted to morph it for a classroom, but we'll get back to that. But it's team building, where a team of people, usually people who work together, come into this room and they have to find a way to break out. They're locked in and there's evidence all over the room. And they have to use little hints and play little games in order to get out of the room. And so I said, I can definitely do that with a book or a story. So I picked a story of an hour. And I also wanted to do the yellow wallpaper, but again, that's when I implement it in my classroom because I loved this. Had too much fun. So basically I did the story of an hour, and I decided to set up a room like the scene in the story of an hour. I used our library at Eastern Wayne. And I was like, okay, so this is what I'm going to do. I had come up with all these games and puzzles that the students could do. Crossword, the riddles were hidden under chairs, because in the story of an hour, she takes some time in a chair. She explains that she sat there and she was really thinking about what had just happened or what she was just told. and under one of the chairs is the next riddle, you know. And I loved it, loved the whole thing, and then realized I made a game. I didn't make an assessment. I did not apply my assessment questions to the game. So I realized this on my second week. I only had 1 week to go. I said, okay. I have the assessment. It's fine. I'm just going to slide it in where I can in the room. So I had to tweak it, and I realized in tweaking it that the shortcoming of this was the fact that I couldn't give this game to individual students, because the game itself is huge. Just the whole room is the game. And to have one student do it at a time would take weeks. And to have them do it as a group, you're no longer assessing each student. You're assessing the group. And there might be one student who's just getting all the answers, and the other ones still don't know or understand. So although it was fun, I realized at the end that it could not be a summative assessment. It would have to be formative, and it would just be with my group. And I'd have little groups, and I'd have one group do the yellow wallpaper. I'd have one group do the story of an hour, and that would just be it. But it was so awesome. I loved seeing it just because the game was more fun and challenging for students. They had to infer. They had to figure out. They had to spell. They had to spell things. They had to look at vocabulary. It really challenged them in so many ways, and they didn't even realize they were being challenged. To read the riddle and say, oh yeah, it's under the chair, was to infer that was what she's talking about in this riddle. It was awesome. It was awesome. Now, keeping all of that in mind, those were my 3 projects, and I did them because I knew I wanted to implement those things in the classroom. I knew it. I said, I want to make my assessments different, and I want them to still be helpful for students, but I don't want them to hate it. I don't want them to feel like this is work. I want them to get through it and love it and not even realize that they're learning with all this fun. And I wanted to do the unit because I want to be a better teacher and be prepared and see what I'm up against or I'm about to do. So now to address the questions, what ideas do I have for how I will continue to engage in activities to improve my teaching, and how have I engaged in activities that will go on to affect my practice? Well, that really goes with my project 1. Even though project 2, project 3, I will definitely put into my classroom because it helped with assessment and just knowing the rules. Project 1, without the idea of a unit, without trying to do the unit, I wouldn't have realized that I was so against summative assessment. I would have never guessed that. I knew that I didn't like the EOC, but I didn't realize how hard it was for me to implement summative assessment in the classroom just as a regular tool. So I needed project 1 to be a unit in order to even have project 2 and 3. And to say that I engaged to say that I engaged in activities that would go on to inform my teaching practice, unit planning is something I'm going to do literally weekly. So I definitely reached that standard this semester. I will use that as a teacher. I'll probably use that in everyday life, honestly, because I wasn't a huge planner. I wasn't very organized. And just in intern 1, I've realized how important it is and how much I need to change my thinking and how I plan things out. At first, I thought I was going to be like fly by the seat of her pants kind of teacher who wrote down a couple of notes and then jumped into the classroom, but that's just not the case. It is super difficult. I have to plan things out, not exactly what I say, but the activities, how I'm going to transition, how these things are supposed to coincide with each other. Definitely helped. Project 1 covers that first part of the standard. The teacher uses evidence to continually evaluate her practice, particularly the effects of his or her choices and actions on others, covered in 2 and 3 because of assessment. I did so much research on the classroom, things that are done in the classroom, but specifically on assessment and how it affects my students. I recognized that certain ways of evaluating students weren't really conducive to them, and we're always taught to differentiate in the classroom, to change things up because not everyone learns the same. So to take that into consideration and say, hey, all my students don't learn the same, let me actually try and change and make a test that helps everyone, and possibly implement it in all schools. But that's just me. So I feel like it covered that. I was continually looking at what I was doing, the research that I was going over. Even with Project 1, it wasn't just doing the unit, but reflection on Unit 1 or Project 1 on my unit. By reflecting on it, I realized, although I came up with a lot of assignments and activities and it was so fun, I really struggled with assessment, and that was something that I wanted to work on. So that pushed and it pushed Project 2. And then to say, hey, loved assessment, but how will it affect my students, pushed me to Project 3. Literally, they connected all the way down. So I was continuously reflecting on what I was doing and seeing how it would affect my students. So that one definitely covered, or at least in my opinion. The teacher adapts practice to meet the needs of each learner. Definitely in Project 3, because making the game was one thing, but to realize that although it's fun, I would have to do some other things to make it more conducive to each learner individually, as we spoke about. I realized that I couldn't just give it to one student at a time. It would take too much time, and by giving them a group, I'm not really seeing what each learner can do. So Project 3 definitely helped me to see if I was changing the assessment to the student, or was I just changing the assessment? And that brought in some big questions and have helped me, because in the future I plan to change the assessment, but also change it where it helps each individual student in how they learn best. And that was some things that were big on my project. Overall, I loved this class, and I found it most helpful because I was able to put time into things I was scared about, honestly terrified of units, terrified of assessment after I realized I had a problem with it in my unit. And it really helped me feel more comfortable and more ready for next year when I teach, because it made me reflect on me as a teacher and what I'm trying to do with my students and ways that I can better myself in that. So it was definitely helpful. Spots that I went to research were the internet, because so much to do. I watched videos. I told you I ended up in Singapore. I was watching so many videos, and I was staying up until like 3, 4 in the morning, not because I had to, but because I really wanted to. I wanted to stay up and learn more about assessment and how Singapore was doing it and how I could implement it in my classroom and the different ways to do a breakout game. And it was a ton of fun. And I think I covered every aspect of that standard, because I've been continuously learning. I plan on continuing to learn this way, and just taking time to research things I'm not sure about being a teacher. I loved it. This was awesome. And if he decides to let me be what the next class sees so that they're not so scared, you're gonna love it. I had a ball. And I thank you so much for this opportunity, because I have a feeling that if I didn't have this class, next year would have been taxing, and it probably would have destroyed me as a teacher, because I would have assumed that because it didn't come naturally, I wasn't a good teacher. And I believe I am a good teacher. I just didn't realize how much went into units, or how much went into lesson plans, or how much I had to research outside of my students doing research in order for them to be grounded and have a nice route to what we're doing. So I am very thankful for this opportunity. I really hope more students get to learn like this. I feel like this way of teaching so helpful. I might venture to say that I learned more in this class period or class semester than I did the whole 4 years that I've been here. This was helpful. This helped me to become a better teacher. So, thanks. Sydney out.